Before I went to college, I took a bit of a gap year and also a little bit more. um, it was for a number of reasons, but the biggest one, I just had some other stuff that I needed to do before I went to college. And so I took this gap year, and part of it was that I was trying to save up money to go to college. And so I found the highest paying job that I possibly could. It was this night shift job at this like warehouse thing, and I won't say what we. Gosh, that's not a pickaxe. I won't say what we produced because, uh, I don't want to give up too much information about myself. But I hated this job. I absolutely despised it. It was like the worst job I had ever had up until that point. And granted, I hadn't had a lot of jobs, but I had worked a lot of different places, and that one was by far the worst. I absolutely despised it. To start, I did not enjoy working nights. If anyone has ever worked night shift, I understand, I get it, I know what that's like. Seriously terrible. If you are ever given the opportunity to work the night shift at your job, don't take it. Deny it. Doesn't matter how much more money they give you, it is never worth it. It sucks. Like, I'm a night owl, right? I like to stay up late, but there's a difference between liking to be up until like 2 or 3 a.m. and part of your job being that you have to stay awake until like 7 a.m. or 8 a.m. I would work from 10 p.m., 9 or 10 p.m. to about 8 a.m. And I would do that 6 days a week, basically. Some weeks I'd do 5, but I'd do that 5 or 6 days a week. And I will admit, I made very, very good money. I was compensated very, very well, and all those extra hours I worked contributed to that. But it sucked. Like, I hated it. I hated every second. The people that I worked with were like shells of people, and it was just awful. It was basically impossible to have any sort of social interaction because I would come home at 8 a.m. and I would go to sleep because I was exhausted, and then I would wake up usually around like 2 or 3 p.m. and like all my friends who were in college were doing classes all day, and then in the evening they would go to work. And so I would come home, or I guess not I'd come home, but I'd wake up, and there would be no one, like none of my friends I could talk to because they were all at work, doing their little college jobs. And I hated it. It was awful. But it's where I made some of the closest friends that I have ever had in my life, but they're friends that I don't have anymore. There's no like sad story there or anything. I just, when I went to college, I ended up being busy and our schedules didn't align, kind of the inverse of the problem that had happened originally, and just sort of naturally we stopped talking. But I met some random people one day. It was like 1 p.m. I couldn't sleep, and I was playing League of Legends. Yes, I know, embarrassing, but I was playing League of Legends, and I'm just playing it, and there's these people trash talking me. And one thing you should know about me is that I love the trash talk. I'm a big trash talker. It's all in good fun, I'm not the type who's like, you should kill yourself or anything like that, right? But I like to mess with people. I like to rage bait people. I'm a big fan of just like having fun. And so I'm talking to these people and I'm like low-key rage baiting them, and they're just getting more and more mad. And every time that they get more mad, I just have more fun because it means that I've rage baited them more or better. And eventually one of them is like, oh, well, if you're such a, big tough guy, you should come and join our Discord server, and, you should talk to us there, and we'll see if you're actually a big tough guy. And I joined this Discord server full of random people that I didn't know. Could have been child predators or something crazy. And I fully planned on just being completely silent and allowing myself to basically rage bait them more. And to my surprise, it was like 4 18 to 20-year-old girls. And immediately like I lost it. I couldn't hold it in. Just it was such a surprising twist. I fully expected them to be like middle-aged men, but it was these like young girls that were my age, and I lost it, and they just started making fun of me, and we just played a game together, and then we kept playing games, and pretty soon we had played like a couple hours together, and my parents came home. And when my parents came home, I stopped playing. Um, but I didn't leave the Discord server. Like I just stayed in there, and I stayed in there for a long time. For that entire gap year that I took, I stayed in that Discord server and just like played with them every day. And they were cool because they were like none of them were in college. They were all just like working, but their schedules lined up with mine pretty well. And most of them were actually unemployed. And I developed these really, really close friendships with these random people that I had never met before. And I hadn't had like close friendships with people online before that. And so it was a unique experience. But it's something that I look back at very fondly, the experiences that I have with those people. And then it all just went away. I went to college and my schedule all of a sudden was busy and I was working like my old friends from high school were, and I couldn't play with them anymore. And like that was it. Whole story. Terrible. Oh, I was talking about my job. Right. Okay. Going back to my job. That job that I worked at, that little warehouse factory thing, despised it. Hated every moment. And I was the youngest person, right? I was like freshly out of high school. I was like 19 years old, and I hated every moment of working there. Every single person was an absolute moron. They were so stupid. And I don't mean that in like a mean way. I mean that in the most sincere way possible. Like these people were literally lowest 10% of intelligence of people I had ever met in my entire life. They were so dumb. And it wasn't because they were like stupid. I just feel like working the night shift somewhere, it just does that to you. Just like naturally over time, you lose brain function. That's how I felt, at least. Absolutely. I got to the end of that year, and I was so happy to leave. It was awful. I would work stocking a very specific section of the grocery aisles. And, I liked stocking those sections because it was something that I could like get good at it, and I was happy. But it was meaningless, like I'd accomplish basically nothing at this job, and the outcome would mean nothing, right? Like at the end of the day, I was just putting products on a shelf and rolling some things around. Like that was the whole experience. There wasn't anything else. There wasn't anything novel about doing that. But it gave me a deep appreciation for the people who are, they get to an old age, as we'll say. The ancient people, how like there's so many people out there who just do a job because they need one. One of my greatest friends at that job started working there when he was in high school, and he had started working there because he got a girl pregnant and decided that he wanted to be a father and wanted to take care of her. And so he went out and he found the highest paying job that he could that didn't impact his college studies, and it was this warehouse. And he starts working there and eventually drops out of college to make more money and becomes the manager. And he was a cool guy. I really liked him. But this isn't me trying to disparage working class people, because I'm a working class person. I absolutely know what it's like to be super, super, super poor and just have to make unfortunate choices like that. But it really helped me determine very early on in my adulthood that like I had these goals and I was going to accomplish them because I wasn't going to end up working a job that I hated. And something I had the luxury of doing is picking a field and having offers for jobs and being able to choose something that I like. But not everyone does, you know? But if you do, you should take advantage of those opportunities that you have. You should be grateful for what you have because most people don't have those opportunities. I lucked out, definitely, and, was born in a first world country where I had the freedom to be able to decide things like that. But a lot of people don't. And if you do, you should take advantage of that. I would go to work every day and I would just I would literally be half asleep. Like literally, and not even joking. There were multiple times where I would shake myself awake and realize in that moment that I had been essentially fully asleep doing my job for a significant period of time. Not something that is good, probably, because part of my job involved driving a forklift. But there were a few times where I'd wake up and I had been working for the last couple of minutes and it just hadn't hit me. It just in my brain didn't even compute that I had been asleep, but I had, and I was so happy to leave that job. I was so excited. When I got to college, I kind of lucked out as well. My sister worked at this little kind of a tech startup, just like a marketing company basically. And they were looking for people who had the ability to use more than 4% of their brain basically and could follow basic instructions. And I was like, sure, I can do that. And so I got to work from home and also hated working from home. I liked the job because it was chill. I didn't have to do anything. Well, I mean, I had to do stuff, but it wasn't super complicated. But I'll tell you, working from home is not for everyone. Some people absolutely love it. I was not that type because for me, there was no way for my brain to distinguish between getting up from my desk after a day of work and sitting down at the exact same desk to enjoy my leisure time. So I didn't really like that job. Luckily, didn't end up mattering because we all got laid off a year after I started working there. The guy who owned the little company basically told everyone that he didn't say it like this, but he basically, when you're working at a startup and the founder's like, oh, we're not making enough money to stay open. Most of the time, what that actually means is that the margins for them aren't good enough. Not that you're not making money or you're not profitable, but just it's not worth the time in their mind, right? They literally just they don't even care. And so that kind of sucked. But it meant that I had to go get another job. And so I went out and I again looked for the highest paying job that I could find, and I got a job as a custodian at my college. And I cleaned the chemistry labs in our chemistry building. And I actually loved that job. It was perfect. It was just enough mental stimulation to keep me interested, but it was just walking around and wiping stuff down basically. And I loved that job. It was awesome. It worked with my schedule super well as a college student, and I got to, I would work these awesome shifts that were 8 p.m. to 2 a.m. And it was perfect because no one was in the building, no one was bothering me. I could just clean, I had my little earbuds in, I was listening to music. It was perfect, it really was. But eventually, I, decided that I wanted to do something that was more related to what my actual degree was. And so I decided that I was going to find some sort of technical job. And I did. I found this nice little, we'll just leave it at technical job, but basically building computer infrastructure for my university. And I loved that job, and it's where I work now. I'm still a student, so I haven't graduated, but it's where I work now, and I love that job so much. I get to work on super, super cool and interesting problems, and the pay is pretty good. But I'll say, more than anything, it's interesting and engaging. And it also, like, matters to a certain extent. Not that I'm saying that, like, you know, my job is super important and I'm practically a nurse. Obviously, that's not the case. I could stop working at any point and it wouldn't really matter, right? And then no one's going to die. But the type of work that I do is the type of work that helps the other university students do their studies better and, you know, learn things. And we have these, like, big computer labs that students will use for their projects, and it's very satisfying work to be able to do that kind of stuff and just know that you've made a positive impact on someone else's life, even if it's just you've helped them do their homework, basically. It's just nice to do that, you know? I've turned down other job offers for other companies. A lot of private companies, like little startups and stuff. I do a lot of, like I said, infrastructure related projects, and oh, that's a pickaxe, okay. And people know that about me, right? Like, not that I'm, like, you know, immensely well known or anything, but, like, you know, people that are local in the industry generally know who I am, and I've gotten some really wonderful offers for jobs, and I've turned them down just because, like, you know, you talk to them about what the job is, and basically you grease the wheels of capitalism, and, like, that's your career now. And I just have no interest in doing that, you know? And again, I have the luxury of being able to say that I'm willing to sacrifice earning money to do a job that I feel is more important. If you don't, you know, you don't have to feel like I'm morally superior to you because I'm doing that. I just have the luxury of doing that. But I did this interview for this company a few months ago, and it was this little, like, email marketing product, basically. I don't even know what it did, to be honest. I actually had no idea. I don't even think they knew what it did. You know, they had built the entire thing with AI, and all the guys who worked there was, like, one guy who knew the technical stuff, but everyone else was just, like, a business or marketing person. And they were super, super confident about what it was. Again, I don't think they actually understood what it was. I don't think they actually knew at all what they had built. But, you know, I'm sitting there and they're telling me about, like, this compensation package, and it's really nice, you know, like, it's actually a very substantial amount of money, and, you know, it could be really nice. And I just, like, you know, I asked them if I can think about it, and they're like, of course, you know, think about it. I wouldn't expect anything less. And I go in to think about it, and it hits me, and I realize in that moment that, like, if I take this job, I will make good money. I'll make very good money. But, like, nothing of value will come out of my work, right? Like, at the end of the day, it's not going to change humanity. It's not going to help anyone, really. Its purpose is to just do things in an email for a business, right? You know, it's like, is that really what I want my life to end up being about, right? When I'm on my deathbed, do I want to look back at my life and be like, oh, yes, I helped 200 companies process returns for their clients in their emails better. Ooh, that's nice, right? Like, obviously, you know, no, of course not. That's such a boring existence, and is why I've been super picky about the jobs that I accept, is because, you know, I know what it's like to work a job that you hate, but I also know what it's like to work a job where you are meaningless, where, like, you have no value to the world and you're just doing things for a paycheck. And that's most jobs, you know. If you're listening to that and you're like, well, you know, my job is that, yeah, statistically, yeah, your job is probably useless, to be honest. The vast majority of people have useless jobs, and that's not a bad thing, you know. That's just a priority that I have set for my own life, and if you've set your own priorities for life, then you know, do that. Do whatever your priority actually is. Don't be super concerned about what other people are doing. But my favorite job, though, that I've ever done was I was a substitute teacher at a high school. you know, post-COVID were difficult times for a lot of schools, uh, and it caused them to do things like hire people who definitely weren't like qualified to be educators. But I didn't really teach anything, right? Like my job was much more like sit in the room and make sure that nobody's dead type of work. But it was really interesting interacting with those young kids and realizing how stupid they were. They were so dumb. And, not every young person is dumb. In fact, I've interacted with a lot of young people who have been very, very smart and have renewed my hope in Gen Alpha. But it was amazing to me how many of those young people just like did not possess the ability to think critically. They didn't possess the ability to do things like read a clock. They didn't possess the ability to do things like read, even. Like many of them literally couldn't read, which was baffling to me. How you get to be 14 to 18 years old and you can't read. You'd show them a word they'd never seen before. And up through now, this is just for America. I don't know how it is. I mean, I'm assuming it's no different in the rest of the world. But in America, there's this topic called phonics. And phonics is the study of, like, the sounds that certain letters and letter groupings make. And you learn phonics all growing up because that's what allows you to encounter a word you've never seen before and be able to sound it out, right? If you don't know phonics, you can't sound out a new word. And these kids just didn't know phonics. And at first I was like, okay, maybe this is like the teachers, maybe teachers aren't teaching anymore, but teachers were claiming that they were. And I don't know. I don't know what happened. I don't know why these kids didn't possess basic knowledge, but it was amazing to me how like I would interact with children from other countries, where where English was not their native language, and they knew English better than a lot of the native English speakers of that were the same age as them in America. And it was like the craziest thing to me. I know a little bit of some European languages. I know just a very, very small amount of Spanish. I know a little bit of French, tiny bit of Czech, but I would be astounded if, I was learning a language and I ever got to the point where someone from that country that spoke that language told me that I spoke it better than native speakers of that same age. Like, that would just be crazy to me. I wouldn't even believe it. But, I know a lot of non-native English speakers who literally speak English better than most young people in America. And that's crazy. But, maybe I'll analyze that at a future date. I don't know. It's just crazy to me. The world is in such massive cognitive decline, and it's just crazy to me that so many people don't see that as an issue. They just see like, oh, I know all the words that I use in normal conversation, and so it's not even worth my time to learn new ones. And that's totally backwards. I don't understand how people can do that. But if that's you, if you think that maybe you're not very smart, or that you don't know a lot of things, or that you feel like you haven't learned enough stuff, like, that's a good feeling to have, actually. It means that you're thinking about things correctly. I'd like to say that I'm somewhat knowledgeable on a large number of topics, and I constantly feel like that. I constantly feel like I don't know enough and that I just need to learn more. And so if you think that, that's good. That's a good sign. That means that your brain is working and that you're recognizing issues in your cognition. So if that's you, keep up the hard work, just keep learning. And eventually one day, I'm sure that you will get to the point where you know stuff. It's never too late to learn more. You can always just choose to start learning. And especially now with the advent of the internet and all this information that's so publicly available, you can just like learn stuff for free. So go out and learn stuff, and don't come back until you know at least one new thing. And then you can watch the next video that I post at some point. that I also don't know when will be because I don't have a schedule or anything. But um, before I leave, I'm looking at the timer right now. My last video was way too long. I think 47 minutes might be slightly too long, unless people want that. You know, if people really like that, then great. You know, I'll keep making hour-long videos. But you know, I don't wanna do video lengths that are gonna be bad that people don't actually want. You know. Um, but before I go, I did want to mention a very astute observer from my last video noticed that I was using mods. It was a very good observation considering the fact that I told you guys I was using mods. So they deleted their comment after I pointed that out, which made me feel bad. But if you're interested in the mods that I use, they're all just quality of life mods, and I'll have them in the description, and also the shaders that I use. Still kind of undecided on if I like shaders or not, to be completely honest. But if you have a preference, if you like the shaders, it's really bright in the sand. If I come over here, it will look better. But if you like the shaders, let me know, and I'll keep them. And if you don't like the shaders, to be honest, I just put them on because I thought they looked cool. But if people don't like them and they like Hurt Your Eyes or something, I also don't have a preference. I really don't. So, I think that's everything that I have to say. I don't actually think I had anything planned. I just kind of booted up Minecraft. I had to move this week, and so I didn't make a video earlier this week, and so it's Friday night, and I'm making a video that I can post tomorrow. But that means that I haven't thought of a topic to talk about, which I don't normally think of a topic to talk about, but I like to have an idea of some fallback topics that I can talk about. And when I started playing, for some reason, immediately made me think of my first job. And so you guys now know about my jobs. But if you have ideas for topics, things in particular you want to hear my opinions about, let me know. Not that it really matters, My opinion doesn't actually matter at all, and you should not listen to my opinion and take it as fact. But feel free to comment and let me know, or don't comment, because I don't care.